Clement, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's great to, well, I was about to say it was great to see everyone, but unfortunately, I cannot see you all, but nonetheless, it's great to be here today. I'd like to now welcome our wonderful Principal Clarinet Sheryl Renk. Hi, Sheryl.
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, and thank you to everyone for being here today and being part of our chat.
Absolutely. So I thought we'd begin the conversation by taking the cue from The Sound of Music, and to paraphrase one of their words, let's start at the very beginning, because that's a very good place to start. So,
yes, and that's my favorite movie, by the way.
Really?
That's right.
I did not know that.
So I was a kid. Yeah.
Wow. Well, how did you choose the clarinet as a kid? How did you start on this path to where you are today?
That's interesting. Well, before I go there, I just have to say, I know you all are aware of this already, but I was so disappointed when the last like 20, 30 seconds of the Weber concerto didn't play out. So you all missed that, but sometime you'll have to come hear it live. But anyway, so I think the way I began the clarinet was, first of all, it was in the 4th grade. And I came from a very musical family in the first place. So I started playing piano at age 7. And both my grandmothers played piano. My dad and my mother both sang, both played. My mother played a little piano. My dad played some brass instruments. And when I was in the 4th grade, the teacher said, how many people in the room would like to start taking up a musical instrument? And I just thought, sure. And I raised my hand. And then they had a sheet of paper, I think it was in the gymnasium, and they had you check off which one you were interested in. And to this day, I haven't a clue why I checked off the clarinet. But I did. The rest is history. Along the way, I did pick up the flute, piccolo, saxophone. I played that in jazz band, and I flute and piccolo a lot. And then there came a point where I just solely focused on the clarinet. So in answer to your question, I really don't know why I picked the clarinet. It just sort of happened.
Sometimes the instrument picks you instead of the other way around.
Right.
And I guess like many professional musicians, you went to conservatory and then you started auditioning for jobs. How did you get to be the principal clarinetist of the San Diego Symphony?
Well, probably I would consider Rosario Mazzeo, who used to be with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, my true mentor in life, in the clarinet world, I would say. And I was fortunate enough to be able to begin doing a lot of subbing at a very young age, about right around the age of 22 with the San Francisco Symphony, because that's where I lived at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, there were several auditions that happened I did very well in. And I, to make a long story short, ended up getting 4 one-year positions out of that, plus many years of subbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew from a very young age that music is the way I wanted to go. There was just no other option for me. It's not like, oh, let's see, I'll be a flight attendant, or maybe I'll be a musician. No, it was always from a small child, I'm going to be a musician, and that's just it. So anyway, back to your question. Yes, I began auditioning for the San Francisco Symphony, and then I did very well, and I progressed on. Other auditions came along, at which I always was fortunate enough to do very well. And finally, one day San Diego Symphony came along, and I was fortunate. Actually, initially, I was given a one-year position here. There was an invited audition back in, I don't remember the year, I think it was 91. And I think there were about 25, 30 people that were invited, and I won that. And then a year later, there was a national audition where I think about 150 people were attended, at least, maybe more. And I was fortunate enough to win that. So that's how I got this particular job, and I was very thrilled about that. And then, unfortunately, just to mention briefly, I hate to say the word, but the bankruptcy in 1996 happened. And fortunately, I won a job at that time for Principal Clarinet in the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra. And I juggled sort of both orchestras for many years. And then came a time when both orchestras wanted an answer. Which orchestra do you intend to stay with? Because, you know, you can't keep juggling anymore. And fortunately, our wonderful donors, the Jacobs, at that moment in time gave our large endowment. And I figured, okay, we are in a stable situation in San Diego. That's where I want to be. So I resigned from the ballet and stayed here full time. And I'm very happy I did.
We're also very happy you chose us instead of the ballet.
Thank you. Yes, same here. Because playing in an orchestra pit was fine in many ways, and it was an interesting experience. But I'd much rather play on stage. It's so much more exhilarating and satisfying. So I'm glad I went this route.
I can imagine. It's of course, I also imagine playing in a pit orchestra, you might be doing, say, multiple performances of the same opera or the same ballet day in, day out. So it would depend on the, you know, the scheduling system of the company. But I imagine with the symphony, playing with a symphony orchestra like us, who primarily do subscription concerts and special concerts in front of an audience,
Yes.
it's a very
Right.
different schedule. So,
Yes.
so in terms of life for you, is there a difference between life and practicing for a pit orchestra versus a symphony orchestra like us?
Well, the focal point is on the orchestra when you play in a symphony orchestra. And that's where I like it to be. I like it to be on us. You know, I don't want to secondary. In a pit, you're secondary. Whether it's in the ballet, you're secondary to the dancers. With opera, you're kind of secondary to the singers. Although it's always a collaboration, you're still secondary when you're in an orchestra pit. So I find it, as I say, much more gratifying, satisfying, thrilling, you know, I might add, being on stage. Yeah, so it's a much better environment for me personally. Maybe some other, you know, people might feel differently, or they might just really love being in the pit, but I'm happy not to be in the pit.
So speaking of not being in the pits, one of the great opportunities that our principal players have is to sometimes play concertos with the orchestra. And so really having the spotlight be on you at center stage. And I wanted to ask you about any of your favorite concerto experiences you've had with San Diego.
Yes, I would say the first one that comes to mind would be the duo concerto I did with my husband, Frank, who's the bass clarinetist in the symphony. We did the Cromer clarinet concerto for 2 clarinets. That was several years ago. I don't remember the year, but that was great fun. I've done several other things over the years. The Mozart concerto stands out because it's such a wonderful concerto.
One of my favorites too.
Yeah,
I haven't had the chance to hear you play it yet, but
Yeah,
one
it
day.
was great. Let's see, I've done the Debussy Rhapsody and the
Mm,
first concerto of Weber, right? You know, for today, I played you the beginning of the second concerto.
mhm.
I played the first concerto with the orchestra. And I think there's been a few other things. Oh, most recently, I guess, was the Prelude, Fugue, and Riffs by Gershwin. That was rather fun. Um,
Mm.
a bit of a jazz ensemble behind me, and that was something different. I found that a lot of fun.
Yeah, I imagine it's a lot of fun when you get to play a role that's a little bit different from what we usually do most of the time. You know,
Yes,
playing classical and being able to sort of show off the jazzier side, the more a different
e-
aspects of the clarinets.
exactly. And that's one of the reasons I chose the very last short piece you'll hear at the end of the interview is by Gershwin, and I chose that. Um, as sort of an homage to the fact that we're missing this summer season, which is so very sad. And I thought, well, I always love playing the summer season because I love that change in repertoire,
Mm.
and I love all the different guest artists that come through. It's I find it fascinating and very exciting. And playing something different. I love playing all our classical repertoire that we do all year long, but it's fun to just do something different during the summer. So I wanted to do something different to this afternoon too.
Absolutely. And as Cheryl said, we will be playing that piece for you at the end of today's program. But I wanted to actually go back. You mentioned that you had played the Chroma Concerto for two clarinets with your husband, Frank. And I always think that there are many couples in orchestras, but there aren't often couples who play in the same section of the orchestra as well.
That's right.
And I wanted to ask you, how did that happen? And
Well, we met in school, so that's sort of how that happened.
mm,
You know, playing music together is wonderful in one aspect. It has its challenges, especially if you're playing the same instrument, because
mhm.
I have to confess, there's over the years been some competition, maybe a little bit of bickering, just a little bit, for various issues, or I won't go into great detail, but what overrides all that is the fact that we understand each other musically,
Mm,
understand our crazy schedules that we keep. We don't have weekends free like everybody else, and which is fine. I mean, that's just what we do. Um, and I think it's wonderful to have somebody that understands your craft, what is so important and dear to you, um, and they feel the same about it. So there's no misunderstandings there. Yeah.
it's always wonderful to. I also feel it's wonderful to have a significant other who sort of gets what you do
Yes.
outside of the house and at work. That
Yeah.
makes such a big difference.
I think it's very important. So we've made it work.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So speaking of craft, another question I've always been very curious about is, as a non-wind player, I don't know too much about the process of making reeds, but I know that that's something that a lot of wind players, well, double reed players and single reed players, spend a lot of time and energy thinking about, or in the case of oboists and bassoonists, they spend a lot of time making them. So I wanted to ask you about clarinet reeds, and do you have to make them yourself as well, or how do you go about choosing reeds? And
Well, let's say this. Reeds is a dirty word.
oh, I'm sorry, I said the dirty word.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Reeds are a constant source of aggravation for us, to tell you the truth, but we just, you learn to deal with it and you learn to figure it out. But we don't make our own reeds like the double reed players do. At least most of us, I would say probably a good 95% of clarinet players do not make their own reeds. We buy them, they're already made, but what we need to do then is try them, and we work on them with various different, like a reed knife or a glass tool that we have, or maybe some reed brush, maybe a little sandpaper. We have to sort of tweak them to adjust them to our needs. But we're fortunate, but not fortunate. We're fortunate in the fact that we don't have to make them from scratch, which is very time consuming for the double reed players. But at the same time, it's very difficult to find a good reed. You may buy a box of reeds of 10, and you would be extremely lucky if you find one that you're happy with. So it's sort of just a never ending process for us, but it's just part of playing our instrument. You know, other people have issues, other different issues, and reeds happen to be our primary issue. So, yeah.
And once you found a good reed, how long roughly do they last for?
Well, I would say at its optimum, probably a good couple of maybe 2 weeks.
Mm.
And then, yeah. So you have to constantly keep them going, and you have to prepare them. You can't just like open a box and start to play on them. You have to soak them maybe for 3 different times, let them dry out in between so they kind of get used to the moisture that gets into them as we're playing them. So yeah, we have to sort of prime them, so to speak, to get them ready for optimal performance in rehearsals.
Right. They almost sound like pot plants in a way. You have to take care. You have to take care of them and make sure they flourish.
You do. Right. And you have to clean them when you're done because, you know, saliva breaks down the fibers. And yeah, it's just something we do, you know, part of our lives as clarinetists.
Absolutely. Let's move on to talk about some music. So Raphael started out inaugural season as full-time music director this season. And unfortunately, with the pandemic in March, we weren't able to have concerts with him as scheduled. But I'm wondering for you, what have been some of the standout performances with Raphael? What have been some of your favorite moments?
Well, the fact that you mentioned the very first concert where we were in conductor search, that's one that definitely stood out for me, the Prokofiev 5.
Mm-hmm. Yes, back in January 2018. Yes.
Okay. His enthusiasm and his spirit just struck me at that moment, and I knew at that moment, okay, this is the conductor for us, because that was one of the best times I've ever played Prokofiev 5. It was truly amazing, and more recently was a performance we did of Shostakovich 10, and his energy and passion is truly inspiring. And when I heard, I think that particular piece, Shostakovich 10, was even recently broadcast on KPBS, maybe sometime within the past month. And we listened to that, and I was just, wow. I mean, it kind of brought me to tears a little bit, not only missing the orchestra, but the fact that it was just so powerful and amazingly played. Not because of my wonderful colleagues, but partly because of my wonderful colleagues, but also because of the inspiration of Raphael, because he truly is inspiring. And that's really the main thing a bunch of really fine professional musicians need, is a good inspirer, because we don't need to be told how to play our instruments or how to play in tune or how to do all the technical aspects we already know. We just need somebody to stand there and bring out whatever they are very best, you know, bring out the best we are as musicians. And he's really excellent at that.
I felt exactly the same way listening to both those performances sitting in the audience. And I think a lot of people around me felt the same. There was some indefinable electrical energy in the room. And
definitely.
And it was just so wonderful to witness how Raphael brought out the best in everyone.
Yes.
Those have definitely been some of my favorite performances too, since I joined the San Diego Symphony. It was really wonderful.
And it makes me miss playing all the more, as I say, listening to these recordings, you know, because being a professional musician is not only our careers, it's not only our vocation, it's our avocation. And so, you know, it's our heart and soul, and it is so devastating not to be performing and playing. And so I just really hope we can get back to it soon. I know we all feel the same way. There's a group of, incidentally, there's a group of the women of the woodwind section, because, you know, there are 9 of us out of 12. So we do keep in touch at least once a week, sometimes more. over Zoom, and we just chat like we're doing, probably you know, a couple hours, and I think it's wonderful. I think it not only keeps us close as people, it keeps us close as musicians. I think it's one of the reasons we play so well together as a unit, is because we like each other so much, you know. And I think when you're a cohesive group of musicians that like each other, I think it helps that you play together very well in the end.
Absolutely, the human element cannot be discounted.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it might be time to take some questions from the audience. Let me just pull some of those up right now. I have another question about reeds. Sorry to bring up that dirty word again.
It's okay.
Thank you for indulging us. We have a question about reeds. Do you tweak reeds to suit different repertoire? For example, classical or romantic or German versus French?
I would say not the different genres like that, but I would definitely say different pieces. Yes, that's a very good question, because if we're playing something like the Mendelssohn Scherzo, you know, with a lot of short notes, crispness that you have to achieve, you're going to pick a reed that articulates extremely well. If you're playing Shostakovich or Mahler, something on the heavier side, you're going to want a meatier reed that maybe gives you a bigger, fuller sound because of you know, the piece of music that you're playing calls for that. So yes, I would pick different reeds for different pieces sometimes, but ultimately I don't have that choice because I'd be lucky if I find, you know, like as I said before, that's probably going to be it. But if I have a choice, yes, I will make those distinctions.
Could you tell us a bit more about your clarinets? Is it an old instrument? Are they specially made? How did you choose the one you're currently playing on?
Yes, for years upon years, I played on Buffet R13 Prestige models. However, just this past September, actually, coincidentally, I purchased a Buffet Legende, which is basically a legend. I mean, in English, it's a legend, but the French call it Legende.
Legende.
I love the instrument. It's the sound is, when I tried it next to other models, the sound was seemed superior. So I really love it. One day, I'd love to get a matching A, because I still play on the Prestige A clarinet. I don't yet have the Legende A clarinet, but one day I want to get one to match the B flat clarinet. So, but I am a Buffet girl. I'm always going to be playing buffets. Yeah, that's just what I do. I think professional clarinetists go with Buffet. Not all, but I think a lot, quite a few. Yeah.
Another question, also a quick message from Laurie Lippmann. Hi, Sheryl. Miss seeing
Hi, Laurie.
And hearing you and Frank. We miss
Yes.
seeing you all too in the audience and in the lobbies at performances.
Yes.
So the question is, how are you keeping your skills sharp during the pandemic in this situation?
You know, it's difficult, I have to say. I am making an effort to play every day, not only because I love playing, but because I really don't want to get too far out of shape, because it's quite painful to try and get back into shape. You know, the muscle, if you take off too much time, oh my goodness, getting back into it really, and you feel like you lose some of your skills, you know, you have to build them back up again. So I've been trying to play as much as I can each and every day, or at least most days. It's good that I have various things to keep me busy. There's lots of symphony projects happening, both with the musicians and with the symphony administration, you know, such as this, or such as the meeting I just did with Raphael. I did an interview with Raphael, and I had to play a little bit of the Beethoven Six. And some other projects we've done, the Mendelssohn project, of course, the, now I've drawn a blank what that was, the Mendelssohn.
The Nocturne from Midnight
Nocturno, thank you.
Right, for the essential players and, essential workers and frontline workers.
Yes, and that turned out really beautifully too. I was very, very pleased with that. And then I've done a few other recordings for the children's book that the musicians have been working on.
Oh,
These little projects have given me incentive to keep it going, so to speak. So, yeah.
I think this would also be a great mentioned, which is our new digital series called Listen Here. It airs every Wednesday evening at 6:30 on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and it's also available to view afterwards. And as Cheryl mentioned, this week's episode is a conversation with Raphael about Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony No. 6. And Cheryl very kindly agreed to be one of our guest speakers on that program. To find out why exactly and to hear Cheryl play more music, please do tune in tomorrow evening or afterwards.
Yeah.
Great. Let's do another question from the audience. Let's see. Can a clarinets be tuned? If so, how?
We tune our instruments just by pulling out the barrel of the instrument. You know, there are 5 pieces to a clarinet. You have the mouthpiece, and then you have the little section of barrel, which is about, I don't know if you can see, very long. And then there are 2 sections of pieces with all the keys on it, and then there's a little sort of a bell at the bottom. So what we do, if we're sharp in pitch, you know, we play the tuning note with the oboe, say in the orchestra, then we'll just pull that barrel out a little bit to basically makes the instrument longer, which makes it a little lower in pitch. And then we do the opposite for a little bit out, try to push the barrel in. So basically we just tune with our barrel, and then we just, as we play, we just listen and adjust as needed. And that's basically all there is to do with tuning for the clarinet. It's not a big process like strings. They have all those strings to adjust and this and that. And yeah, it's much simpler for the clarinet, luckily.
Yep. As a former sometime string player, I was always jealous of the wind instruments, only having 1 piece of equipment to tune, not 4 strings.
Oh, true. That's true. Yeah. But sometimes we have more than 1 clarinet to tune if we're playing different instruments. But yeah, like we have the A clarinet to, you know, prepare as well. Or like Frank, sometimes he'll have bass clarinet and 2 clarinets. And, you know, maybe sometimes E flat, or Terry might have E flat and A clarinet and B flat clarinet. So sometimes there's more than 1 instrument for us from time to time.
So true. Grass is greener on the other side, as they say.
Yes, that's right. And then you also have to keep those instruments warm, because if you just let them sit there and you're not playing them, then 20 minutes later, it's time to play that instrument. Then you're like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Gone sharp or flat.
You have to be on top of it at all times. Yeah.
Absolutely. So another question from the audience. Are there any clarinet concerti that you've really wanted to play that you haven't had a chance to play yet?
Wow, that's a really good question. I haven't given that much thought. There's so much wonderful repertoire out there for clarinet. As far as concertos with the orchestra, maybe the Weber second concerto, because I've never done that before. And it's just kind of flashy and fun. But I would say more so than playing pieces with orchestra, I love doing, I don't love it more than playing with orchestra, but I love a lot of the chamber music repertoire. And I love the opportunity to play various different chamber music pieces with my colleagues, or maybe with other people, soloists that come in, like we did in February. I did the Brahms Clarinet Quintet, and that was great fun. So there's a lot of pieces I haven't done chamber music wise that I maybe love to do one day. Again, it's Weber. I seem to be bringing up Weber all the time. But I've never done the Weber Clarinet Quintet, for example. There's like a handful of things I've always kind of wanted to do that I've never done before, but yeah.
I'll make a note of that.
On the other hand, I like to be surprised. It's like, oh, we're going to, next season you're doing this. Oh, great. So yeah.
Variety is, I like variety too.
Variety for sure.
So, so just one last question from me for today before we wrap up. I know we were chatting earlier, and you told me one of your favorite composers is Chopin. And I thought, well, Chopin never wrote anything for clarinets, so why Chopin?
Well, I think that's probably one of the main reasons. Because when there's clarinets involved, or even no matter what the instruments are involved, I tend to be a little bit critical. I listen with a critical ear rather than an enjoying ear. So when I'm listening to Chopin, I can just listen to the beauty of it, and I'm not judging, and I'm thinking about a million other things. Oh, I didn't like the way, that sounded, whether it be me or anybody else. I didn't like the way that came across, or that happened, or whatever. But with beautiful piano music, I can just kind of immerse myself in it and become enthralled and just enjoy it and not have the critical aspect involved.
Absolutely. It sounds like pure pleasure.
Exactly.
Not business.
Yes. Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.